Greetings, this is Greg. It's been a couple days since the Air India crash, and we now have enough data to refute some of the speculation that's been circulating on social media, and often by quite a few of these so-called experts here on YouTube. These are that the pilots failed to select gear up after takeoff, and or that the pilots took off with the flaps up. I'll start with the landing gear. We know from the two grainy videos we have of this incident that the gear did not retract and that the plane went in with the gear down. First of all, I want to say that even if the pilots forgot to retract the gear, and I don't think they did, but even with the gear down, the 787 will fly around just fine. It can't go fast, it will burn fuel like there's no tomorrow, but it won't fall out of the sky just because the gear is down. This is an attempt to point blame at the pilots, but even if it was true, it would not have caused the crash. I'm relatively certain that something was wrong with the landing gear or landing gear system, and I think I can prove it. Although there are two videos of the incident, only one shows the takeoff run, and it's of very low quality. Worse, the view of the plane is blocked when the pilots rotated the plane, meaning when they lifted the nose wheel off the ground. Let's get into it. This is an Air India 787. This isn't the takeoff that resulted in the crash, although I do think it's the exact same airplane. What matters for now is how the landing gear trucks work in the 787. The truck is the portion of the landing gear that contains axles, wheels, tires, brakes, and the truck tilting mechanism. It's that tilt I want to focus on here. In this picture, the plane is fully on the ground, no truck tilt. When the pilots rotate the plane by raising the nose wheel, the trucks tilt to keep all the wheels on the ground. So relative to the fuselage, the front wheels are now down. You should be able to see that in the picture here. As soon as the plane lifts off, the trucks tilt to the opposite direction with the rear wheels down, as you can see here. This is the normal gear down truck orientation on the 787-8. This is how they should be prior to landing, and the plane is designed so that they go to this position just after liftoff, so that if the plane settles back down, you're good. When the pilots retract the gear, and I'll put links to good videos showing gear retraction and extension on the 787 in this video's description. Anyway, when the gear retracts, it tilts to the front wheels down position. I don't have a good picture of a 787 with the gear down and the forward tilt because when the gear is down, it's not normally in this position. That's why I'm putting those video links in the description. So if a 787 is in flight with the gear down and the truck's tilted forward, meaning front wheels down, one of two things happened. First, it could be that the trucks never went to the rear wheel down tilt just after the mains left the ground. Or it could be that the pilots tried to retract the gear and the retraction started, the trucks tilted to the front wheels down retracted position, but then the retraction stopped at that point. Now let's take a look at the 787 right before the crash. Now I'll admit this image is a bit blurry. It's a recording of a recording, but the trucks look like they are tilted front wheels down to me. A higher resolution video of the original recording often seen can now be found at all the usual locations. I took this screenshot and I think it clearly shows the trucks tilted into the front wheels down position. Take a look and see what you think. Unless this is some sort of optical trick, it means one of two things happened here. It's possible the trucks never went to the aft wheels down position after liftoff. If that's the case, it's certainly not the pilot's fault. Either an air-ground sensor didn't detect that the plane left the ground, or there was some problem with the landing gear. In that case, and I have not flown the 787, but I have flown other Boeings, and when you don't get the truck tilt, there is usually something that warns the pilots not to retract the gear, or simply prevents it. In that situation, there is usually a checklist to perform before trying to override the system and retract the gear. In the 757 and 767, the landing gear handle has a lockout that prevents the pilots from retracting the gear until they override it, as directed by the checklist. I'm not sure how this works in the 787, but as far as the checklist goes, I'm not sure. But the truck tilt situation is the same. So in this scenario, it's not likely that the pilots forgot to retract the gear. It's far more likely that there was a problem with the gear. The other scenario here is, the other possible scenario, I should say, regarding truck tilt, is that the trucks did tilt after takeoff, but when the pilots selected gear up, the trucks tilted to the front wheels down position, and then the retraction stopped due to some serious systems failure. Either way, this isn't the pilot's fault. Just because the gear is down does not mean that the pilots forgot to retract it, and the evidence I see is that they probably did not forget. Let's get to the wing flaps. A lot of early analysis on this crash suggested that the pilots took off with the flaps up or retracted them too early. That's just nonsense, which we now know because the wreckage shows that the flaps were extended. You can also see this a bit in the higher resolution video that's floating around. The flaps were not up, but even without the solid evidence, this was just a stupid theory to begin with. If the flaps are up for takeoff, yes, the takeoff roll will be very long, sometimes so long that it results in a crash. There have been other accidents because of this. However, we know this plane got off the ground, so even if the flaps were up, it still managed to build up enough speed to fly. Not only that, it had enough speed to climb up to about 600 feet above the ground. That's way outside of ground effect, so this isn't a case where the plane was barely flying and needed ground effect to keep itself in the air. For reference, when a plane is very close to the ground, typically about 1/2 a wingspan to maybe 1 full wingspan in altitude, the wings produce some extra lift from what we call ground effect, but this plane climbed way above that. So the plane was flying, and when the engines operate normally, the 787 accelerates really fast, even when heavy on a hot day. There are also a lot of warning systems and procedures in place to prevent an accidental no-flap takeoff in the first place. But again, if that happened and the plane had enough speed to take off anyway, which it did, it would not have then settled back down to Earth in the way we see it happen in this video. I don't think there's much room for doubt here that the cause of this crash was due to a massive loss of thrust. The flight path of the plane looks that way. We have ADS-B data from the plane's transponder that shows a very low rate of climb, about half of what it should have been, which is indicative of low thrust, and it appears that the ram air turbine was out, which would happen with the dual engine failure. There are other things that can deploy the ram air turbine as well, but the dual engine failure sort of fits here, so it's quite certain that there was a massive loss of thrust. We just don't know why, and we can only speculate there. When the cockpit voice recorder or information from the flight data recorder become public, we should be able to zero in on some of the more likely causes and rule some of them out. The voice recorder will hopefully help with that. The problem here is that there are several ways for an aircraft to experience a dual engine failure, but all are extremely unlikely. In other words, none are common enough to say, oh yeah, that's probably it. Yet it certainly appears that both engines either failed or somehow rolled back to a very low thrust setting. So unlikely or not, one of these unlikely scenarios probably happened. Fuel contamination seems to come up a lot as a possible theory. Maybe, but I don't see any signs of it. There is a chance that the plane was fueled with the wrong type of fuel. I'm seeing this theory a lot also. But I think the chances of that having caused this crash are also very close to zero. In fact, this one is last on my list of suspects. Airlines, and I am an airline pilot, get their fuel from the same places over and over at all the different airports they go to. I don't see how one airplane would have managed to get some forbidden type of fuel. Now, going the other way, for example, going from into a piston engine airplane, yes, this certainly happens. Putting jet fuel into a piston engine airplane does happen. There have been many crashes from that, but not the other way around. Plus, jet engines will run on piston engine fuel, generally speaking. It just shortens their life. It could have been the wrong type of jet fuel. That is a thing, but those unusual types of jet fuel are usually military-only types of fuel, and they don't get anywhere near a civilian airplane. And if they did, I still don't think they would cause such a sudden loss of thrust. I just don't think it's likely the plane was misfueled, and if it was, I don't think it would have caused both engines to fail so quickly. I don't think both engines suffered a simultaneous catastrophic failure like internal parts failing and causing tremendous damage. The odds of that happening to both engines at the same time seem incredibly small. Plus, I don't see any smoke or signs of serious engine damage or massive amounts of bird ingestion or anything like that. I suppose it's possible the plane was out of fuel, but that also seems incredibly unlikely. Can't rule it out, but I do know that when a jet engine shuts down due to fuel exhaustion, it typically will not shut off suddenly like you snapped your fingers. Instead, it flames out and back on, leaving puffs of smoke for a couple seconds before shutting down for good. I don't see that happening in the video that's out there, but again, it's not a great video, so I can't totally rule it out. My leading theory here, and again, we are, way out in the land of speculation here, but my theory here is that it looks like these two perfectly good engines shut down due to some fuel valves closing and stopping the flow of fuel to the engines. But we'll have to wait to find out why. My condolences to all those lost and those family members and friends of the victims, which are, of course, seriously affected by this tragedy. I sincerely hope they can get some small amount of comfort in finding out what actually happened here, but it could be a while. Hopefully, the aviation authorities will release the data they have, especially the cockpit voice recorder, before too long. Thanks for watching. This is not my normal type of content, nor is it going to be in the future. I'm more focused here on historical aviation on this channel. That said, I am an airline pilot with over 20,000 hours of flight time in over 50 types of aircraft, three of those Boeing jets. I've also worked in all types of aviation jobs, from Alaska bush flying to wide-body intercontinental long-haul passenger flying. So, although I've been around, keep in mind I have never flown the 787. Goodbye and have a great day.